to investigate. They return, letting them know the fugitives have gone to the Delaware village. Magua, who is a skilled orator or good public speaker, if you will, and has good people skills, responds last to the runner's report. He makes a strong case with the Hurons and has regained their favor when recommending, cautiousness, prudence. As a result, this earned Magua his leadership position in the group, and at the break of dawn, Magua and his 20 men, of which he was in charge, take an indirect route to the village. One of the chiefs addresses the beavers in the pond as they pass by because the beaver is his totem. And a totem is believed to have a particularly spiritual significance, and it's like an emblem. So he, was particularly satisfied when the larger beaver sticks his head out of a lodge, but after the group moves on, one of the beavers removes its head and reveals its Chingachgook. And that's where we pick up in chapter 28. Okay, so Shakespeare from Much Ado About Nothing. Brief, I pray for you, for you see 'tis a busy time with me. The tribe, or rather half-tribe of Delawares, which has been so often mentioned, and whose present place of encampment was so nigh the temporary village of the Hurons, could assemble about an equal number of warriors with the latter people. Like their neighbors, they had followed Montcalm into the territories of the English crown and were making heavy and serious inroads on the hunting grounds of the Mohawks, though they had seen fit, with the mysterious reserve so common among the natives, to withhold their assistance at the moment when it was most required. The French had accounted for this unexpected defection on the part of their ally in various ways. It was the prevalent opinion, however, that they had been influenced by veneration for the ancient treaty that had once made them dependent on the Six Nations for military protection, and now rendered them reluctant to encounter their former masters. As for the tribe itself, it had been content to announce to Montcalm, though through his emissaries with native brevity, that their hatchets were dull and time was necessary to sharpen them. The polite captain of the Canadas had deemed it wiser to submit to entertain a passive friend than by any acts of ill-judged severity to convert him into an open enemy. On that morning, when Magua led his silent party from the settlement of the beavers into the forest in the manner described, the sun rose upon the Delaware encampment as if it had suddenly burst upon a busy people was examining his arms with an attention that is rarely bestowed on the implements, when no other enemy than the beast of the forest is expected to be encountered, and occasionally the eyes of a whole group were turned simultaneously toward a large and silent lodge in the center of the village, as if it contained the subject of their common thoughts. During the existence of this scene, a man suddenly appeared at the furthest extremity of a platform of rock which formed the level of the village. He was without arms, and his paint tended rather to soften than increase the natural sternness of his austere countenance. When in full view of the Delawares, he stopped and made a gesture of family by throwing his arm upward toward heaven, and then letting it fall impressively on his breast. The inhabitants of the village answered his salute by a low murmur of welcome, and encouraged him to advance by similar indications of friendship. Fortified by these assurances, the dark figure left the brow of the natural rocky terrace where it had stood a moment, drawn in a strong outline against the blushing morning sky, and moved with dignity into the very center of the huts. As he approached, nothing was audible but the rattling of the light silver ornaments that had loaded his arms and neck, and the tinkling of the little bells that fringed his deerskin moccasins. He made, as he advanced, many courteous signs of greeting to the men he passed, neglecting to notice the women, however, like one who deemed their favor in the present enterprise of no importance. When he had reached the group in which it was evident by the haughtiness of their common mien that the principal chiefs were collected, the stranger paused, and then the Delaware saw that the active and erect form that stood before them was that of the well-known Huron chief, Le Renard Subtil. His reception was grave, silent, and wary. The warriors in front stepped aside, opening the way to their most approved orator by the action, one who spoke all those languages that were cultivated among the northern aborigines. "The wise Huron is welcome," said the Delaware in the language of the Maquas. "He has come to eat his succotash with his brothers of the lakes." That makes me think of Suffering Succotash, which was from one of the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Anyway, he has come, repeated Magua, bending his head with the dignity of an eastern prince. Sylvester the cat, I believe he would say Suffering Succotash. Sorry. Okay, random. Anyway, the chief extended his arm, and taking the other by the wrist, they once more exchanged friendly salutations. Then the Delaware invited his guest to enter his own lodge and share his morning meal. The invitation was accepted, and the two warriors, attended by 3 or 4 of the old men, walked calmly away, leaving the rest of the tribe devoured by a desire to understand the reasons of so unusual a visit, and yet not betraying the least impatience by sign or word. Oh, I skipped a footnote, guys. Where's that footnote at? Footnote number 2. How did I miss it? Oh, succotash. Yeah, succotash. There it is. It's a dish composed of cracked corn and beans. It is much used also by the whites. By corn is meant maize. Okay. A concoction of maize and beans. Sounds pretty hearty. Let's see. Okay. That's next page. During the short and frugal repast that followed, the conversation was extremely circumspect, warlike, safe, and related entirely to the events of the hunt in which Magua had so lately been engaged. It would have been impossible for the most finished breeding to wear more of the appearance of considering the visit as a thing of course than did his host, notwithstanding every individual present was perfectly aware that it must be connected with some secret object, and that probably of importance to themselves. When the appetites of the whole were appeased, the squaws removed the trenchers and cords, and the two parties began to prepare themselves for a subtle trial of their wits. "Is the face of my great Canada father turned again toward his Huron children?" demanded the orator acquiescence to what he knew to be false, or about his reluctant acceptance. So he kind of reluctantly, gave in that sense to what he knew to be false, and he just sort of accepted it and said, "The tomahawks of your younger men have been very red. It is so, but they are now bright dull, for the Yankees are dead and the Delawares are our neighbors." The other acknowledged the pacific compliment by a gesture of the hand and remained silent. Then Magua, as if recalled to such a recollection by the allusion to the massacre, demanded, "Does my prisoner give trouble to my brothers?" "She is welcome. The path between the Hurons and the Delawares is short and it is open. Let her be sent to my squaws if she gives trouble to my brother." "She is welcome," returned the chief of the latter nation, still more emphatically. The baffled Magua continued silent several minutes, apparently indifferent, however, to the repulse he had received in his opening effort to regain possession of Cora. "Do my young men leave the Delawares room on the mountains for the Hurons?" he at length continued. "The Lenape are rulers of their own hills," returned the other a little haughtily. "It is well. Justice is a matter of a redskin. Why should they brighten their tomahawks and sharpen their knives against each other? Are not the pale faces thicker than the swallows in the season of flowers?" "Good!" exclaimed 2 or 3 of his auditors at the same time. Magua waited a little to permit his words to soften the feelings of the Delawares before he added, "Have there not been strange moccasins in the woods? Have not my brothers scented the feet of white men?" "Let thy Canada father come," returned the other evasively. "His children are ready to see him. When the great chief comes, it is to smoke with the Indians in their wigwams. The Hurons say, too, he is welcome, but the Yankees have long arms and legs that never tire." My young men dreamed that they had seen the trail of the Yankees nigh the village of the Delawares. "They will not find the Lenape asleep. It is well. The warrior whose eye is open can see his enemies," said Magua, once more shifting his ground, when he found himself unable to penetrate the caution of his companion. "I have brought gifts to my brother. His nation would not go on the warpath, because they did not think it well, but their friends had remembered where they lived." When he had thus announced his liberal intention, the crafty chief arose and gravely spread his presents before the dazzled eyes of the hosts. They consisted principally of trinkets of little value, plundered from the slaughtered females of William Henry, and the division of the baubles. I'm sorry, I gotta stop there. I would imagine that those items had some energy attached to it in that massacre. Anyway, I digress. Okay, continuing. In the division of the baubles, the cunning Huron discovered no less art than in their selection, while he bestowed those of greater value on the 2 most distinguished warriors, one of whom was his host. He seasoned his offerings to their inferiors with such well-timed and opposite compliments as left them no grounds of complaint. In short, the whole ceremony contained such a happy blending of the profitable with the flattering that it was not difficult for the donor immediately to rate the effect of a generosity so aptly mingled with praise in the eyes of those he addressed. This well-judged and politic stroke on the part of Magua was not without instantaneous results. The Delawares lost their gravity in a much more cordial expression, and the host in particular, after contemplating his own liberal share of the spoil for some moments with peculiar gratification, repeated with strong emphasis the words, "My brother is a wise chief, he is welcome." "The Hurons love their friends of the Delawares," returned Magua. "Why should they not? They are colored by the same sun, and their just men will hunt in the same grounds after death. The redskins should be friends and look with open eyes on the white men, as not my brothers and its spies in the woods." The Delawares, whose name in English signified hard heart, an appellation that the French had translated into le coeur dur, himself subjected the Delawares to much reproach among their French allies, and they were now made to feel that their future actions were to be regarded with jealousy and distrust. There was no deep insight into causes and effects necessary to foresee that such a situation of things was likely to prove highly prejudicial to their future movements. Their distant villages, their hunting grounds, and hundreds of their women and children, together with the material part of their physical force, were actually within limits of the French territory. Accordingly, this alarming annunciation was received as Magua intended with manifest disapprobation, if not with alarm. "Let my father look in my face," said Le Coureur. "He will see no change. It is true, my young men do not go out on the warpath. They had dreams for not doing so, but they love and venerate the great white chief. Will he think so when he hears that his greatest enemy is fed to the camp of his children? When he is told a bloody Yankees smokes at your fire, that the paleface who has slain so many of his friends goes in and out among the Delawares. Go, my great Canada father is not a fool. Where's the Yankees that the Delawares fear?" returned the other. "Who has slain my young men? Who is the mortal enemy of my great father? Let long Caribbean." The Delaware warriors started at the well-known name, betraying by their amazement that they now learned for the first time one so famous among the native allies of France was within their power. "What does my brother mean?" demanded Le Coureur in a tone by its wonder far exceeded the usual apathy of his race. "A Huron never lies," returned Magua coldly, leaning his head against the side of the lodge and drawing his slight robe across his tawny breast. "Let the Delawares count their prisoners. They will find one whose skin is neither red nor pale." A long and musing pause succeeded. The chief consulted apart with his companions and messengers dispatched to campus was probably ever before lighted by his morning beams. Its number somewhat exceeded 1,000 souls. In a collection of so serious savages, there is never to be found any impatient aspirant after premature distinction, standing ready to move his auditors to some hasty and perhaps injudicious discussion, in order that his own reputation may be the gainer. An act of so much precipitancy and presumption would seal the downfall of precocious intellect forever. It rested solely with the oldest and most experienced of men to lay the subject of the conference before the people, until such a one chose to make some movement, no deeds in arms, no natural gifts, nor any renown as an orator would have justified the slightest interruption. On the present occasion, the aged warrior whose privilege it was to speak was silent, seemingly oppressed with the magnitude of his subject. The delay had already continued long beyond the usual deliberative pause that always preceded a conference, but no sign of impatience or surprise escaped even the youngest boy. Occasionally an eye was raised from the earth where the looks of most were riveted and strayed toward a particular lodge, that was, however, in no manner distinguished from those around it, except the peculiar care that had been taken to protect it against the assaults of weather. At length one of those low murmurs that are so apt to disturb a multitude was heard, and the whole nation arose to their feet. And the whole nation rose to their feet by a common impulse. At that instant the door of the lodge in question opened, and 3 men issuing from it slowly approached the place of consultation. They were all aged even beyond that period to which the oldest present had reached, but one in the center, who leaned on his companions for support, had numbered an amount of years to which the human race is seldom permitted to attain. His frame, which had once been all tall and correct, like the cedar, was now bending under the pressure of more than a century. The elastic light step of a native was gone, and in its place he was compelled to toil his tardy way over the ground, inch by inch. His dark, wrinkled countenance was in singular and wild contrast with the long white locks which floated on his shoulders in such thickness as to announce that generations had probably passed away since they had been shorn. The dress of his patriarch, for such, considering his vast age, in conjunction with his affinity and influence with his people, he might very properly be termed, was rich and imposing, though strictly after the simple fashions of the tribe. His robe was of the finest skins, which had been deprived of their fur, in order to admit of a hieroglyphical representation of various deeds and arms, done in former ages. His bosom was loaded with metals, some in massive silver, and 1 or 2 even in gold, the gifts of various Christian potentates during the long period of his life, or like Christian monarchs. He also wore armlets and cinctures above the ankles of the latter precious metal. His head, on the whole of which the air had been permitted to grow, the pursuits of war having so long been abandoned, was encircled by a sort of plated diadem, which in its turn bore lesser and more glittering ornaments that sparkled amid the glossy hues of 3 drooping ostrich feathers, dyed a deep black in touching contrast to the color of his snow-white locks. His tomahawk was nearly hid in silver, and the handle of his knife shone like a horn of solid gold. So soon as the first hum of emotion and pleasure which the sudden appearance of his venerated individual created had a little subsided, the name of Temanant was whispered from mouth to mouth. Magua had often heard the fame of this wise and just Delaware, a reputation that even proceeded so far as to bestow on him the rare gift of holding sincere communion with the Great Spirit, and which has since transmitted his name, with some delightful alteration, to the white pursuers of his ancient territory, as the imaginary tutelar saint of a vast empire. Okay, we got a footnote. The Americans sometimes call their tutelar Saint Tammany, a corruption of the name of the renowned chief here introduced. There are many traditions which speak of the character and power of Tammany. Okay. chief therefore stepped eagerly out from the throng to a spot whence he might catch an nearer glimpse of the features of the man, whose decision was likely to produce so deep an influence on his own fortunes. The eyes of the old man were closed as though the organs were wearied with having so long witnessed the selfish workings of the human passions. The color of his skin differed from that of most around him, being richer and darker, the latter hue having been produced by a certain delicate and mazy lines of complicated and yet beautiful figures which had been traced over most of his person by the operation of tattooing. Notwithstanding the position of the Huron, he passed the observant and silent Mago without notice, and leaning on his two venerable supporters, proceeded to the high place of the multitude, where he seated himself in the center of his nation with the dignity of a monarch and the air of a father. Nothing could surpass the reverence and affection with which this unexpected visit from one who belongs rather to another world than to this was received by his people. After a suitable and decent pause, the principal chiefs arose, and approaching the patriarch, they placed his hands reverently on their heads, seeming to entreat a blessing. The younger men were content with touching his robe or even drawing nigh his person, in order to breathe in the atmosphere of one so aged, and so just, and so valiant. None but the most distinguished among the youthful warriors even presumed so far as to perform the latter ceremony, the great mass of the multitude deeming it a sufficient happiness to look upon a form so deeply venerated and so well beloved. When these acts of affection and respect were performed, the chiefs drew back again to their several places, and silence reigned in the whole encampment. After a short delay, a few of the young men to whom instructions had been whispered by one of the aged attendants of Damaman arose, left the crowd, and entered the lodge, which has already been noted as the object of so much attention throughout that morning. In a few minutes they reappeared, escorting the individuals who had caused all these solemn preparations toward the seat of judgment. The crowd opened in a lane, and when the party had re-entered, it closed in again, forming a large and dense belt of human bodies arranged in an open circle. Awesome. Alright, that was chapter 28. Alright. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day or night or evening, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you